many of the books I read were written by academics, and academics are great. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's a difference between an academic studying an entrepreneur and then actually the entrepreneur writing the book.
All right, so welcome to the podcast, Mike McFall. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
It's my pleasure. Great to be here.
Awesome. The first question for you is, did you start your morning with your Americano? I know that's your favorite Biggby coffee.
I did. It's the first thing I do every single morning. I've got a Seiko Barista. It's a pretty high-end espresso machine, residential espresso machine, and it does a nice job. And yeah, that's Biggby espresso in there. And I did the Americano with 4 ounces of espresso, and I do 1 cup of boiling or just barely boiling water, and I've got a little 2 ounces of whole milk and a spoon of sugar, a little tiny spoon, just a little bit of sugar. So every day, everything, same thing every time.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
Consistency is key, right?
Yes.
I learned
Absolutely.
that from your book for sure. I started my morning off with a Biggby coffee as well.
Hey, look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. My favorite is the mint mocha. So
Oh, yeah.
I love the mint mocha. It settles my stomach and it gives me a nice kick to start my day.
Yeah, it's great. No, that's a good drink.
Yeah, it's great.
Used to be called the peppermint patty.
Oh, really?
Yeah, until we had trademark issues, and then we had to change it to the mint mocha. So, yeah, I forget who. Somebody sent us a letter saying, "Hey, you can't use peppermint patty," so we had to switch it.
Makes sense. Well, yeah, it's a great drink. So, start my morning off with that. I wanted to jump into your book because, as I mentioned to you last time, I went ahead and I bought your book off Amazon. I've got it right here in front of me. Grind, a no bullshit approach to take your business from concept to cash flow. It's a phenomenal book. It's filled with a ton of real world insights, packed with authenticity and just nuggets of just gold throughout. And I've got these isms written down in my personal journal. I'm just curious, could you talk about where the inspiration for the book came from and why you decided to write it?
Yeah. So I'm an avid reader, right? So, and I've done a fair amount of reading in the business, startup, and entrepreneurial space. And I found most of this stuff to be uninspiring for a couple of reasons. One was that it was generally written by sort of uber successful entrepreneurs flying around in private planes, 9-figure net worth, right? And like they were looking back at startup through rose-colored glasses, and they weren't bringing the true essence of what startup would feel like. That, and then also many of the books I read were written by academics, and academics are great. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's a difference between an academic studying an entrepreneur and then actually the entrepreneur writing the book. And then the other piece that I didn't enjoy is that so much that's written about entrepreneurialism right now is focused on tech. Everything's tech, and it's venture capital. Well, if you actually go through and look at the numbers of how many startups are backed by venture capital a year, it's like none. So few startups. And so a lot of the people that do the writing live in places like Stanford. They go to university, are affiliated with Stanford, or they live in Ann Arbor, or they live in, and it's all these places where they feel like that's reality, and it is reality for them. If you are involved in the engineering department at the University of Michigan, I mean, there's venture capital everywhere available to you, right? Or at least the ability to pitch venture capital. But for most people, they don't even know what venture capital is, and so that's why a lot of the books I couldn't relate to, or I didn't think they related to the sort of average person that wanted to start a business. And so the image I had in my brain was, if one of my hockey buddies came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a business. Would you mind sitting down with me for a couple hours and, over a beer and kind of sharing your insights?" Like, what would I tell him? What would I tell him? And that was the the flavor of the book that I tried to portray, is that the reader, buddy of mine, sit in my backyard at my picnic table with a beer in hand, just talking over what I've learned over 25 years of doing this.
Yeah, it definitely, that flavor rings throughout the book. I mean, the book is less about um, like methodology about how to start a company. There is a little bit of that in there, especially with reaching revenue as fast as possible, because obviously, like, money and revenue is the lifeline of the business. We all know that as entrepreneurs, but it's more about, I guess, the philosophy and mindset and the actual actions that you take as an entrepreneur. And that was what resonated with me, because I'm a doer. I appreciate the thinking and the strategy behind actually doing things and creating things, but at the end of the day, if you don't execute against your goals, you're not going to reach them. And and that really, I mean, it really struck a note with me. And I told you last time we spoke, I started waking up at 5 a.m. because of your 5 a.m. Schedule that you included in the book. So
I'll tell you, man, it's the thing that I wanted to be really clear about is that, many people perceive entrepreneurialism as having a good idea, but the most critical component to starting a business is the entrepreneur, the person behind the idea who's going to execute on the idea. And I go a step further and I say, if you aren't the most important ingredient, your self-awareness is, right? And so, to me, the number of people that I see that enter into the world of business startup but really have no idea what they're getting themselves into, or um, haven't given much thought to how important they are, their mentality, their attitude, their approach is to whether the business is going to be successful. And it's almost like people assume that they innately have that stuff, and I find most don't.
we're going to get into this a lot. We're going to dive really deep into this concept, because I think self-awareness taps into both, like, the strengths of the individual, the strengths of the team, and the awareness that you have with managing, but also modeling a dependable leader. And um, and, and we're going to dive in deeper into, like, where some of that comes from. I want to ask you about where your work ethic comes from, because obviously the premise of the book is grind, and obviously, lots of really late nights, really early mornings, like being there the first one at the Biggby store and opening, what was it, 300 seconds early.
Yeah,
Um,
300 seconds.
so can you provide any insight as to, I guess, like, maybe like your childhood experiences or early experiences in life and interests that helped you become the man that you are today?
you know i I don't know. I was a normal kid, right? And there's nothing. I did happen to come from a family where, you know, my parents worked. They worked hard. They were both successful in their careers, and I think had meaningful careers. And work was important to them. And so, um, I think, I mean, that is $1 million question, which is, where does work ethic come from? And I think it's the realization that you just don't get things done in the world without it. And I know that, and that, and it's um, things don't happen by accident. People don't hand you things. You either create or you don't. And I want to create. I want to build cool things. I want to do cool things day in and day out in my life. And so I wake up really interested in being productive, and like getting things done and accomplishing. And so I think it really is, the motivation stems from wanting. And what I've always said is, I'm not motivated by money. I'm not motivated by material um, lifestyle. I mean, to some degree. I think everybody is, but like, it's not like, I don't, but what I'm motivated is to wake up in the morning and have cool shit to do. Like, come on here with you. This is cool for me. I like this, right? Like I want to wake up in the morning and I want to have cool things to do with my day. And you don't get that unless you're willing to work, unless you're willing to do the work. So I think that's where where it comes from. And I'm not sure where I got that or where I learned that. I had a boss though at a young age. I was 13. I just turned 13 and I got hired at a golf course. And this guy was the manager of the golf course. And he was an ex-Marine. He was 80 years old, hardcore. I mean, this guy was hardcore. And I learned, I learned like work ethic from him. I mean, I really did. I mean, he drove me really, really hard as a 13, 14, 15 year old, and I'll never forget the story. I think I tell this in the book where he came up to me and he said, "Hey, Mike, at close, you're supposed to sweep the bathroom floors." And I'm like, "Yeah, Bob, I know." And so then he took me in the bathroom, and behind the toilet, he'd placed a matchstick behind the toilet. He said, "That's been there for 3 days and you've closed the last 3 days. You're clearly not sweeping the floor at night." And I'm like, I have been sweeping the floor, but yeah, you're right. I haven't gone behind the toilet. But he did that kind of stuff to me all the time. And it was like this game. I mean, he was almost like he was like a mentor, I mean, he really took an interest in me. He used to come to my hockey games in the wintertime, even though, we didn't see each other in the winter. I mean, he was a real special person. And so I think having somebody like that in your life too, independent of your parents, is really valuable.
That's a great segue into another question I had for you was about mentorship, and also dreams, but we'll get to that in a second. So you mentioned mentorship and this like hardcore Marine, like drilling you. My father actually was a Marine, so I grew up in a very disciplined household, and that's where I learned my work ethic. Was because if I didn't take out the trash or didn't do my chores, I was getting it from my Marine father and my mother, who is like OCD. She just loves things being clean. She needs everything to be in its place. Everything needs a home. So I resonate with that. Um, but so when it comes to your mentors and your personal board of directors, how do you, because in your book you talk about Fred DeLuca, right? And him and being a mentor for you, and you always listening to his advice and really taking it more often than not, probably like 90 to 10% take the advice. How do you distill good advice from the noise? And how do you know whether you have someone who's going to be a good personal like mentor or board of director for you?
I think we all know. I do. I think I think when somebody's real or not. You know, um, and or it becomes apparent pretty quickly that they're not real. I have a situation right now with somebody that I've been working on something with, and I went into the relationship thinking that they had their act together and that they were committed, and it was going to be a good situation. And I think we've missed 2 out of the last 3 meetings because he just didn't show, and like that, it just becomes apparent quickly, right? I think people's reputation and then their track record's important. So have they lived up to, are they somebody that you want to emulate? And so Fred DeLuca clearly in franchising is somebody I wanted to emulate. And um, but there's also I look back on my childhood, and there were people involved in my childhood that were uh, huge factors for me. Just enormous. I got a friend of mine's dad who was just he's a gunslinging entrepreneur. I mean, he was in manufacturing, and it's just a capital intense business, and he was building a company, and just I spent a lot of time with him, and he was rugged. I mean, he was not he was not demure by any stretch. And but I think back to, you know, he, for a long time, I've kind of outgrown him now. But for a long time when I was younger, he was one of the voices I would listen to. You know, whenever I would think through something, I would always think, how would he respond? What would he say in that moment? And you know, that's, you know, that's so how do you choose a mentor or a personal board? You know, it's track record. A lot of it's gut feel. Is the person authentic? Are they genuine? Are they who they say they are? You know, and so there's no magic in that. What I would say is the minute you feel like somebody is not authentic and not genuine, you gotta turn and move, right? And just and that's, you have to, you can't spend time. Those relationships are toxic. I had a situation last year where, a couple of years ago, where I hired a guy to help me with something, and he had made some promises, and the price tag was pretty steep, you know, and I got 3 months into it, and it just wasn't working. And so, and it was kind of a hard situation because I was friends with them and I knew him pretty well, but you know, I just had to cut that. I mean, there's you can't let that stuff linger, and you got to be able to make the decision, and then you have to be very clear with them why you're cutting it. I said, this, you know, I told him, I said, this was the expectation I had coming into this. This is what we've been able to do after 90 days. It's not working. Like, we haven't even come close. We haven't done anything in relation. So, you know, I'm going to move on.
So it sounds like a lot of it too is like who you want to emulate after. Like you don't need to recreate the wheel, right? So many people, successful people, wake up early in the morning. That's like,
Yeah.
you know, like that's a proven thing that, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of successful people do that. And you know, being like a trusting, dependable, dedicated leader or, you know, follower, just the whole deal is like you don't need to recreate the wheel. If you um, you know, if there's somebody that you aspire to be, that's somebody that could be a good fit for not only modeling your lifestyle or your leadership style, but also just like um, you know, certain habits after things like that.
Yeah. Well, and also, you're calling on different people in different situations. I mean, there's situations that I would call on my mom, but there's clearly situations I wouldn't, right? So in your brain, when you're inside of something, you're calling the right team, you're calling the right people to advise you. And you know, rarely is that an actual conversation for me, right? Like, I mean, maybe on occasion it would be, but for the most part, it's all occurring inside my brain. And um, you know, you're calling on different people in different scenarios. Do it all the time, you know.
Do you have a specific methodology? I mean, I know you said it's in your brain, but like there is it just that gut feeling that's like this person would be the best person to help me here within my network?
I think I
Or
just naturally do it, right? I think I just naturally, I don't know that it's not like I dial them forward and pose a question and get an answer, but like, you know, you have conversations with yourself all the time in your brain.
Mhm.
This scenario is you're having a conversation with somebody who is in your brain, you know, like that, you know how they're going to reply, right? And so you have that engagement with them. And so, you know, and maybe there's a word for this that I'm just not familiar with, sort of in philosophy or something, but you know, it's essentially using your perception and understanding of somebody else to help you solve the problem, and what voice or what would they bring to you in that moment.
I want to transition to your experience at Kalamazoo College. And this was something we talked about previously, but I'm curious about that trip to Sierra Leone because it seems like that might have been sort of a pivotal turning point for you in some way, shape, or form. You describe it as where you've learned to love. And can you talk more about that? Because you don't really dive into too much detail in the book.
Yeah, so you know, there I had an event in my high school where I sailed around the world. I don't know if that's been part of the biography, that taught me certain things, right? Sierra Leone was a different kind of experience. what I understood when I left Sierra Leone was that people, I mean, the Sierra Leonean culture is very, very, very different than the culture in rural Michigan, where I'm from, right? I mean, incredibly different. And I was really comfortable there. I was really, I was able to acclimate well and to have, just beautiful experiences with new friends and friends there that, and frankly, what I understood was that we're all doing the same thing. We're all searching for authentic relationships. We're all searching for support. We're all searching for people to nurture us and to, and to give us a safe place, a safe environment to live within, and then to go out into the world and experiment, but still always have that safe place to come back to, right? And like that they do it very differently than we do, right? I mean, Sierra Leone is a polygamous society, so you have, it's a very different dynamic, but yet in every one of the homes that was the dynamic, right? And that's what, like a good friend of mine's father, I think he had 5 wives, and it was only the rich people that had a lot of wives too, by the way. And so this guy was my best friend, and there, and he, I got to go to all of these different homes, of all of his dad's wives, 5 or 6, and like it was just so cool to see what was occurring inside of these homes, and it was so communal, much more communal than here, right? Like they didn't live, their homes weren't these little islands, like ours are. Their homes were connected to the community and connected to other family, and and I realized they'd figured this out way better than we have, in terms of that sort of support and nurturing, that kind of environment. I mean, my friend could go to any one of these homes and it was wide open for him, even though it wasn't his mom. He was still interconnected, part of that community, part of the family. And so, I think, what I learned is that that is what's critical, is that we all have something like that. It doesn't have to be family. It doesn't have to be necessarily a spouse that provides that for you. I mean, conventionally, that's what we try to do here. But there's a lot of different ways to get that, but we all need it. You have to have it. It is one of the absolute fundamentals in being able to live a life that is meaningful, is that you have that support, you have that, environment.
I'm curious what a world would look like, or a United States would look like, that was less focused on competition and more focused on community. You have any insight or thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you hear it said all the time that the more successful you are, the more famous you are, if you're an actor or actress or something, the lonelier you are in so many ways, right? And I think, and that none of that's worth it. None of and so if we could just learn from people that and I don't have that in my life, but I can sense it, like there are moments when I can sense, that my life could go in a certain direction where I could lose the meaning, I could lose the relationships, I could lose what's been important to me for my whole life. And I want to try really hard to have that not happen. And maybe that means I need to stop being competitive. Maybe that means I need to stop striving. Maybe I need to make some changes in my life, because I don't want to end up in a spot where, yeah, maybe I have obtained some degree of material success and so on, but I don't have the interconnectivity that I know is critical.
So, what are you most afraid to lose?
The relationships, the friendships. Uh, yeah, I had a situation this week where a vendor of ours was also a friend of mine growing up, very, very close friend growing up. And I didn't know, he'd been a vendor of ours for 16 years. And I didn't know we'd fired him. And no one told me. And my brother called me because my brother's, very close friends with him. And my brother called me and said, "Hey, you need to reach out. Like, this is shitty." And I did. And yeah, he was super pissed. And that's a pretty extreme example, but that kind of thing can happen, right? Where someone feels slighted, but you don't mean for them to be slighted. And the other piece of it is you got to make sure that the life side of things isn't so busy that you're not taking the time to connect with people. And that's what I'm afraid to lose. I'm afraid to lose those connections where I reach out to somebody who's a close friend and we're close friends, like that's what I'm afraid to lose. And how many of those are there? I don't know, 15, 20, 30 of those kinds of relationships that are super important.
From both like personal and professional, or are you
Yeah, mostly personal.
mostly personal?
Mostly personal, but some professional. Like my business partner is a good example. I mean, that's a super close relationship. There's a few others professionally that are that important to me, but a lot of them are personal. They go way back. My kids, of course, my parents, my brothers. I'm including all of them in that too.
And as a young entrepreneur and co-founder of a company, I'm starting to experience this in my life. It's starting to unfold. I'm starting to, bring in certain people that were more friends into more, I would say, serious dynamics and relationships, particularly from like a professional and like company standpoint. I'm even bringing in some family members that I would trust that I don't, at least I perceive the risk of bringing them in to be relatively low because of, their goals and where they can contribute and things like that. I think I told you last time, one of my co-founders, three of us, Addison Wiener, he just moved into my basement literally
Yeah,
a couple
yeah,
days ago. And we're already experiencing like some growing pains just as a result of, hey, like straight up, he's moving in with me and my mom. Like, even just that dynamic is something that, you have to grow into. You can't just like, not everything can just be, roses and butterflies off the top.
right.
And not to say that it's going poorly, it's actually going really well, but just mixing those relationships and having kind of the stakes, be elevated, it can sort of start to change dynamics and relationships. And I'm starting to
Totally,
experience that.
totally. Yeah, I mean, um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of situations that occur like that you're put into a position that changes your the dynamics within in a relationship, and you want it to remain the way it always has been, but it's not going to. And that sucks to some degree, but you got to grow through that and get to the other side of it and try to make the relationship as strong and healthy and powerful as you can make it in the new circumstance.
How do you mitigate that risk, particularly from a relationship point of view? And what advice do you have about how to be resilient in times of crisis?
The first part of the question is, you're not a big deal. I don't care who you are. You are not a big deal, right? Like, you got to remember, you are not important. Like, you have got to maintain humility and understand where you sit in the scope of things. Like, even take somebody like Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks. Who cares? The guy built a company. He figured out how to sell a bunch of cups of coffee. Like, that doesn't make him some supreme being. He's just a dude, right? He's just a guy. So, you take even the uber successful people, you put them in the timeline of history over the last, 2000 years, and they're nobody, right? I mean, and so like you always have to keep that in mind. And what's important is the relations that you have with people and that you're taking care of those people, right? Like, and doing everything in your power to take care of that relationship. So to me, that's critical, right? Is to never, ever leave behind your humility. Like, and I don't care who you are, right? And then what was the second question?
It
Uh,
was about resilience in times of crisis. Particularly, I remember, I mean, I was asking more about relationships, but also if you want to reference the boogeyman at
yeah.
all, or maybe another story.
Well, no, I think so we've been talking a lot about crisis lately because we're kind of in one, and I think I got to knock on wood because anything could happen tomorrow, but we've been really fortunate through this crisis. But I think that the thing that people, how I'd answer that question is, if you tell little white lies every day, right? Innocent little white lies, that becomes your mode of operating in life. And when you operate that way, you get comfortable with telling little white lies or not doing the right thing. So you get comfortable with that. So then when something very significant happens, you are not tuned into doing it the right way or doing the right things or telling the truth or being genuine. And so in moments of crisis, it is everything that you've built, the foundation you've built is what gets you through the crisis, right? And a lot of companies tried in this moment, they tried to become solid, worthy, dependable companies in the moment of crisis, but they just didn't have the foundation built, and no one believed them. Their employees didn't believe them, and so I think resilience is that you wake up every day and you're doing the right things minute in, minute out. So when you're tested, that's what's natural to you, is doing the right things.
Yeah, the foundation, that's the most critical thing. That's what we're trying to build with Maximize is a give first network. And so it comes from the team first is how are we giving first, right? We ask ourselves this question all the time. What does it mean to be a person who gives first? And I think you're right. Like if you build a foundation of trust, right? And you're in the habit of telling the truth, you're never going to have to remember what you say because it's always just going to be the truth.
Right.
And I think
Yeah,
that
and it's just the habit. The habit's telling the truth. Yeah.
so let's come back to that self-awareness piece because I think that's really critical here to telling the truth and the foundation and modeling modeling success, right? For yourself, for the people that you surround yourself with. How does one go about building self-awareness?
I don't even know. I mean, there's a great line from a book called Insight by Dr. Tasha Urich. And in that book, she says, and this line is clogged my brain for since I read it because I have the hardest time with it. It is, if you believe you're self-aware, you probably aren't. And I love that, right? It's like this, it's like, yeah, am I self-aware? Like, but I think one of the most beneficial things that I learned about self-awareness is a lot of like sort of self-awareness, elementary self-awareness 101 is controlling your own reactions and impulses around an event or a conversation or something that occurs for you, right? So controlling that. Yeah, that's like 101. Take it a step further, and self-awareness is what impact am I having on those around me? So an event's occurring, I'm in that event. I'm controlling and understanding what's going on for me. But then what am I doing to contribute to those around me, and what impact am I having on them? And the really important part of that is you can't know. You think you know the impact you're having on those around you, but you can't know unless you ask them and get that feedback, right? And then they tell you, hey, when this is occurring, your behavior, when this was occurring, your behavior was this. And that's how, and people don't want to tell you, right? People are adverse to bringing that kind of a reality to you, right? Like they don't know, no, you don't know what they're really thinking. And even when they tell you, you have to be really suspect on whether or not they're being truthful, especially if you're a leader, especially if you're a CEO, because people have got a real vested interest in you thinking they're great and you liking them. So are they really going to bring you the fact that you were a jerk and that when you said this or when you said that, it was really off-putting? And so on, right? So to me, self-awareness is, the it's not the end all, but a big part of self-awareness is making sure that you've got people around you that are bringing you reality. And I just did an article for Fast Casual magazine, and in it I wrote about the CEO disease. And the CEO disease is that you believe what people tell you, and you think that that's reality when it's not, right? And so anyway, that to me is getting the trying to get the real feedback from people about your impact on others in given situations. That to me is awareness.
It's a great answer and really difficult to develop. It almost comes from experience, but also just, I don't know, it's like you have to almost just be proactive about asking people.
Mhm.
And but it goes a step further, because like you said, the CEO disease, they could just tell you what you want to hear and then you feel great about yourself, but maybe your culture is suffering. um
Oh, no
maybe,
doubt, right?
right.
But I think one of the keys there is to ask very specific questions. Don't ask, hey, how was my presentation, or how did I do in that meeting? You're going to get platitudes for the most part. But you could say, I had this moment in the presentation where, I said this and I saw people reacting in a certain way. What was your take on,
Mhm.
what that was that I was presenting? How did that make you feel when I said this, and this? And then at that point, generally you're cracking open the door. They're giving you some feedback, right? And then what's mission critical is reacting in a very healthy way to that feedback. And it's so hard. It's so hard. I mean, it can be, we all think that we're these, we're spiritually aware people. We don't, but man, there's sarcasm is one of the really natural ways of coming back in a situation like that, right? And sarcasm is one of the most destructive things for self-awareness. It's just a defense mechanism, right? But anyway, how you react when somebody starts to give you feedback, and then if you react well, you can probably go back in and ask a few more questions and get a few more insights. But that dance, that delicate dance around feedback, is one of the things. And I mean, I'm not good at it. I mean, I don't take the time to ask, and that's shitty, right? But I don't. I mean, I rarely take the time to ask. I'm just on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And so, um, but we need to be asking all the time.
Well, we learned something from each other. So I'm definitely going to spend more time asking my team, um, specific questions about what I could be doing better, and how I can help them do better too. I
Yeah.
think I learned in a book that you it's actually How to Win Friends and Influence People. Highly recommend that book too. Of course, you
It's
got
a
to read
great book.
got to
Yeah.
read Grind first, but
That's Dale Carnegie, right?
yeah,
Is
it's
that
Dale Carnegie.
yeah, it's amazing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the self-awareness piece is so critical in that book because it talks about how, and he talks about how you criticize, not criticize, but critique yourself first. And I think that's where the self-awareness comes. Instead of saying, oh, you messed up here, here, and here, you say, man, I really could have done a better job here. Where do you think I can, what do you think I can do to improve? And then from there saying, are there any ways that you think you need to improve? And how can I help you improve? So critiquing yourself first, and also saying people's names. People love the sound of their name. And so if you say, wow, like, I didn't do so great today, but Nina or Addison, you've done a great job today. I'm so proud of you. What else can I do to help you? Because I noticed there's some challenges happening here. So it's like it is a dance. It's a psychological dance, but also a dance of like body language. If you're modeling, uh, good behavior, right? Listening behavior, active listening behavior, looking at them in the eyes, nodding, saying yes, things like that. It shows that you're actually paying attention to them, and I think that's what people crave the most is that affection and that attention.
Yeah. And I would add one more piece, which is people will give you, if people think you live within integrity, people will give you more leeway. People will be more trusting. They'll, if they don't think you have integrity, you're going to get very little input. You're going to get very little engagement. You're going to, and so it starts with you, right? Are you acting with integrity? And if you are, um, people will allow you to have an engagement with them, and they'll trust you in a feedback exchange that it's going to be healthy, that it's going to work, it's going to, but if you don't have integrity, and integrity is like so easy to lose and so difficult to gain.
Interestingly enough, I actually did a study on it my freshman year, undergrad at U of M. It was the relationship between respectability and likability, and it was a meta study on um, different demographics, age, position, title, gender, race, ethnicity, background, all of these things, and how they played a factor in the um, I guess the challenges between building respect and building likability. And sometimes people think that you can't have both. It's you either are respected or you're likable. But I feel like in our conversations and just getting to know you, you're that type of person that's both. Do you have any insight into how you can be both a respected and a likable leader?
Well, thank you for that, first of all. Thank you. That was a very nice thing to say. um uh,
Oh, one more
I,
thing before
yeah,
you answer. I think I told you last time the word nice is not in my vocabulary. It
I
means
know, I know, no, you scolded me on that last time we were together. uh Likable and respected. There's a way to bring a critique, a comment to somebody where they can leave that being feeling respected, and then therefore they respect you, right? um and that to me is independent of likable. I mean, I deliver difficult news to people all the time, but I try my hardest to do it in a way that, like, everybody's okay in the end, and that I'm trying to do it because I care. I care about them. I care about their growth. I care about um, how they're going to feel leaving that conversation, right? So that is, to me, that's respected. That's respect. You earn that. But then, you know, and then likable is a subset of that. Likable, I mean, I suppose you could be that person and not be likable. That's okay. I mean, I don't know that likable is necessary. I think it's of course you want to be the what what award and what honor did George W get? Like the president you'd most want to have a beer with, or or something. I remember laughing at that. I was like, well, that's one way to rank your presidency. But so anyway, I think that I don't know that likable to me is 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 that big of a factor. I mean, I don't know that maybe it's hard to be a respected leader and be unlikable. Maybe I've never really thought about that. I mean, you have to earn respect, and to be a leader, you have to be respected. And a big part of being respected is respecting those that you're working with. Period. And a lot of leaders don't get that piece. You don't get respect without giving it, right? Like you have to respect people and treat people well and treat them with respect in order to be respected. And then, you know, unlikable, I think, is just a part of that equation. I likable and unlikable. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure I answered that very well.
Maybe give it some thought and we can have another discussion about it. I definitely have a lot of thoughts about it, but we can talk about that again next time.
Okay. All right.
I wanted to jump to this quote that you have in your book, and I'm just gonna pull it up so that I don't botch it. Let's see here. Here we go. So you mentioned in your book that every morning you wake up amazed that your life is just like you dreamt it would be. And this was something I personally didn't resonate with, as an aspiring entrepreneur, CEO. And I believe that many of the listeners will probably have questions about how to discover their passion, how to discover their niche and goals. And not everyone is going to have a clear vision for their future. So can you talk more about when it was that you realized that your life was how you wanted it to be? And is it something that's stagnant and like something that you have attained or achieved, or is it more of like a gradual, like striving for the dream life?
Well, it definitely ebbs and flows, right? Um, you know, one of the things that I went through a period of my life where I divorced. I had a son from that relationship. I ended up in a situation where I was in a custody battle for him, and went through a fairly lengthy process and ended up securing custody of him, right, when he was 6. And that was a difficult moment. And I always want, but post, I his mother and I divorced when he was 1, and post that event, I always knew I wanted a family. I wanted a kind of a big family. I wanted lots of kids. I wanted a house full of joy and love and chaos, and you know Legos and Lincoln logs everywhere, and like that was the life I wanted to live. And so when I was writing the book, that was the situation I found myself in, and so I had secured this idea of being in a home, with a wife that I love, with kids, and but at the same time I really wanted to be transitioning my career, from day-to-day manager of a business to the CEO visionary of a business, and then moving into writing and teaching and so on, right? And so that was the transition that book was going to take me on, and I knew that. And so that was very deliberate. None of this happened by accident. And so for me to, a lot of people in my situation, being the owner and CEO of a company, they can't give up the day to day. They don't ever give up the day to day. They've got to be in the thick of it in order to feel important. They have to be the one dealing with the crisis. I don't deal with crises anymore. I don't have anything to do with them. On the rare occasion I get brought in on something. And my life now today is how I designed it back in the day when I was living a life of putting out fires every 5 minutes, knowing that's not how I wanted to live my life forever. I was okay with it for a period of time. It's about a 5-year window. It took me to transition all of that. And, we're now transitioned into the life that, I spend a lot of my time. I still spend a lot of time on Biggby. There's no doubt about that. But I do spend a lot more of my time today reading, writing, doing things like this. And, I'm not frantic with the day to day of what's happening at Biggby. And so that's what I meant when I said I love my life. I love waking up in the morning and doing what I do. And it's going to be this way for a long time. I don't ever want to give up my management of the business. I love it. I do want to write more. I do want to read more. I do. And I will, right? And I want to continue teaching. And so, that's going to be the next chapter. And we're sort of at the beginning of that chapter. But what brings you joy? Like I know for me, when I was in college and I had a day where I got to spend most of my day reading, studying, learning, preparing, that those were some of the greatest days of my life, right? I loved those days. And it so and then, obviously in college you get to like put the books down at whatever 6 p.m. and then you get to go out with your friends and have a great night, and have fun. And that was great. So that's the feeling I want to duplicate. And so I know that. And but where is it in your past, or what have you done in your life where you had that sense of like just, like joy and contentment, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing? I still think in many ways I probably should have been an academic. But I'll get there. I'll get there.
You're well on your way, right? I mean,
Getting there, yeah.
we're gonna. I have a couple questions about the class that you co-facilitate with Brian Hayden. So we'll
Yeah.
get to that in a moment. But I want to just, as a final question for really the Biggby journey, you talk about this process and this building, preparing, and you don't get anywhere by accident. You have to understand where you want to go, right? It's like a bow and arrow. You have to pull your arrow back and aim so that you know actually where you're going. And that pulling back is very much so a metaphor for the preparation and the planning and all of this sort of stuff that goes into getting you where you want to go. Um, how does one rise from a minimum wage barista to the CEO of a company? You probably get asked this question a lot, but I, I need to know, like, how does that happen?
uh, Ryan, there was a lot of luck involved. I mean, there's a lot of luck. So, I have to give an enormous amount of credit to my business partner, and his willingness to accept me in that role, as an equal partner, right? As an equal equity holder in the business. And I was also very, very patient. So I find that a lot of people are just, they're ridiculously impatient. And I was, even though I owned the same percentage shares of the business, for many years I was by title a different position of authority than he was. He was the CEO, right? And we lived that way and operated that way for 15, maybe 16, 17 years, right? Where I was by org chart, I was reporting to him. And there were times that was really hard on my ego because we weren't managing the business that way. The business was very much being managed as partners, and he was always very good about incorporating me into all the decision making. But he also knew we were equal partners, so it was like and so I think. But then at some point, I was I was bold too. I was patient, but I was also bold, meaning I went to him at one point. I said, listen, the, the deal is I need the C-suite title. I want when if something were to go wrong with Biggby, I need to be in a position where CEO is part of my history so that when I go out into the world, I have that in my quiver, right? And people need to know that I was in a position of leadership here, not in a secondary position. And that conversation took us, I don't know, maybe 2 years. Um, and I didn't press at all. I presented it. And so, I think that I would say one, it was, and by the way, picking the right opportunity, like you got to pick the right opportunity. You got to be inside of a company or of an environment that has really, really significant growth capability. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, there's nothing there. And so I was fortunate to be smart enough to pick an industry that I knew there was real growth potential. I was fortunate to land inside of a partnership that was very understanding, and willing to take care of me and so on. And we were able to have the conversation about co-CEO, right? But then I think also, to my credit, I was really patient and I didn't push anything inappropriately. I just, I brought the things to the table that I needed. And then we worked hard-ish, like we did the work. And, and then I was bold in many ways. Some decisions that I pressed hard for and executed were significant and really worked. And they're still working, so, um, I would say luck, I would say patience, and some picking the right, making some good decisions.
Mike, this patience factor, it's something that I think a lot of listeners could really benefit from, including myself, just as, an entrepreneur is it's, and you talk about this in your book too, be patient with the results, but relentless in the execution. And,
Critical.
and to hear like this conversation about C-suite title, it took 2 years. Many startups, 90% of startups fail in their first year. And you had a conversation about a title for 2 years. Just that,
Yeah.
I think that puts things into perspective about the time horizon and the mentality and mindset that entrepreneurs need to have in order to actually be successful.
Well, I mean, in many ways, it's the negative effect of things like venture capital too,
Hmm.
because you know venture provides an enormous service, enormous value, right? Like I don't question that ever, but they also bring a sense of urgency, like you better grow this thing and you better grow it right now. You better grow it. Like we got to grow this thing tomorrow, right? And so yeah, I mean, we're 25 years in and we've built a nice business. But it was, we have no outside pressures. We can take 2 years to have a conversation about uh title. you know um we talked for about we did a name change in 2006. We talked about that for years before we did it. And I think I was just having a conversation with a really well respected real estate developer here in Southeast Michigan the other day. And we're talking about this new entity, and he really lined up with sort of he asked me what my exit was. What my exit is. And I said, I don't exit. There's no exit. And that's very much the way his family and he approaches their business. Is they buy shit and they don't exit, they hold it, right? And we were talking about how to capitalize a new company that we're working on, and he's like, but you understand, like the way you're approaching this is not aligned with your philosophy of no exit. If you pursue that form of capitalization, in fairness, the people that are bringing the money to the table are going to have expectations, and that's not going to align well with your philosophy. He goes, that's going to be a problem. And so, to me, that was a really important conversation for me. And patience to me is, I don't know, man. It's so important that you take a long horizon. People that like want to grow companies through venture capital, move to PE, go public, exit, be worth $100 million. I know a bunch of those people. They get to the end of that and it's like, okay, I got $100 million. Now what? Who cares? I I had a moment in my life where I realized that I love to golf. Like golf's my thing, right, for me. And I joined country club. And it's because it's a beautiful place to play golf. It really is. It doesn't get much nicer for golfers. And so, but I realized like a lot of the people inside of these country clubs, it's a bunch of fat, rich white dudes all trying to prove out that they're richer than the other fat, rich white dude. And it's like, this is stupid. And so, like, I just had this epiphany. I still go, I still enjoy the country club. I'm still, part of that. But I don't ever want to be that guy. I don't ever want to be the guy that exits for 100 million and nobody cares. Nobody cares that you exited for 100 million. Nobody cares, or 200 million, or whatever the number might be for you. Nobody cares. And when you realize that, it's like an epiphany. And so then it becomes about value creation. Then it becomes about how do I contribute? Then it becomes about what's my legacy going to be? You build exit for 100 million, there's no legacy there. There's no legacy. You built a little something, it was worth $100 million, and you have $100 million. There's no legacy. So you have a nice boat. Or maybe you give it all to charity. There could be some, or do really good things with that money. There could be legacy there, but that would be a hard right turn. But so to me, it's now about value creation moving forward. Like, how do I contribute? And that's a lot of what the teaching piece is for me.
Mike, I really respect that about you. I can tell that you're doing this for the right reasons, and the authenticity shines through. I mean, I got that sense from you before we even had a chance to speak one-on-one when I read your book, and just having a live conversation with you and a couple of questions here and there has been very insightful for me and much appreciated. Um, I want to ask you a couple of questions about CFE and teaching, because I know that's something you're very passionate about. And so, can you tell me a little bit more about how you got involved with co-teaching this class with Brian Hayden? It's called Finding Your Venture. It's
Yeah.
in the Department of Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Michigan.
You know, yeah, so I must be good at coing because I've got a co-teacher, I've got a co-CEO, but Brian put this class together a number of years ago. I think it's now 8 years ago, and he is, I think most of his years he's had a teacher with him, a co-teacher with him. I think he's had a couple where he didn't, and he said he really enjoys the teaching part much better with somebody else there with him. So Paul Brown was his co-teacher last year for, I think, for 3 years. Paul Brown taught the class with him. Paul was elected to be a regent at the university, and so he can't be an employee of the university and be a regent, so he had to resign from that position. He still teaches one of the classes, and he's just absolutely brilliant. But and so Brian and I met, and I gave him a copy of my book before it was done. It was, I think I had there's a version that comes out pre-publishing, or I can't remember what it's called, but I gave him a copy of that, and he read it, and then we sat down and started talking, and he said something to the effect of, it'd be really cool to have your voice in the classroom. And so, it's a big time commitment and so on, but would you be willing to come and co-teach the class with me? And so, he had told me a lot about the class, and I just thought it was a freaking cool concept. I had no idea it was as cool as it is. It's a really, really well designed course, and I love it. And so, yeah, and so Brian approached me, and yeah, he's a special guy, and and I really enjoy interacting with him, and I learn a lot from him. And there's a huge benefit to me personally to be involved in a class like that, right? Like I learn all the time, and that's really cool. So that's how I got involved in it.
So for any Michigan students listening, could you give us just a sneak peek, a preview of what is it that a student is going to gain and learn from being a part of this Finding Your Venture course at the University of Michigan?
Well, I mean, it is really about it's different than my book, because it is very much a end result of the class is nuts and bolts process to of what you need to go through and how you go about starting a business. And you also have the beginning of the class, which is around finding a pain point, solving a pain point through the creation of a company or a product. And I'll tell you, like it's just brilliant. So you end up with 44 ideas. We had 44 people in the class. So you have 44 ideas, and then we put them in groups of 4. And so we had 11 groups. And then inside of that group, you pitch your ideas, and then the group chooses one idea. And so now you have 11 ideas. And then the group does the research and puts the presentation together, and then the group pitches it to the class. Then at the end of the day, you have the class voting on, and that, well, then there's a self-assessment of whether it's a viable idea. And we are really clear about the fact that it doesn't have to be a viable idea for you to get perfect marks in the class, because a big part of entrepreneurship is realizing and knowing when an idea isn't viable. Right? Like that can be more valuable than the idea that works in some ways. And so I think like this class, I think 4 out of the 11 or 5 out of the 11 said, no, this, we do believe this is a viable idea. And then the question is, are you going to start it? And nobody says yes to that because everybody's students, right? So that's what you go through. But you, at the end of the day, you get and then we have everybody vote on, of the concepts. I think there were 4 that are the most that are viable. Which one by vote is the best? So we took 44 ideas and distilled them down to one idea, right? And to me, and then Brian goes through this like cathartic process, and it's so good live, where you throw everything that needs to happen onto a whiteboard from now until exit almost, and then he has these thresholds, right? You define thresholds, and then you prioritize everything that's got to get done in order to reach that threshold. Mm-hmm. And then you don't spend any time on anything beyond that threshold, right? And so you end up with this very succinct list, 11 things, right? And then you prioritize those 11 things, and and you walk out and there's your game plan. It's right in front of you. Like follow these steps, follow these, cross these thresholds. At the end of the day, there's a really good chance you're going to have a viable business in the end. And I mean, I don't know anywhere else in the world that exists. It's great. So I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, and I showed up to the first class, and he was like, "Hey, prepare a half hour on this." And that's kind of how the first semester went. And then I went through all this with him, and I got to the end of this class, and there's kind of like this crescendo moment, and I'm like, "Holy smokes, that was incredible!" What just happened right there. So yeah, it's been cool. I love it.
I can tell you're passionate about it because of the smile on your face. So
it's just so smart, right? Like I mean, I would love to be able to take credit for it, and I can't. Thank God I can't, because I probably wouldn't. But like, I can look at that and I can say that is awesome, right? Because I didn't invent it. I just get to be a part of it.
It's incredible. All right, I've got 2 final questions for you here. The first of the last is, do you have a game plan for the Red Wings, right? Because I know that one of your passions is hockey, and you talk about that being sort of like North Star for you. I don't know if it's an appropriate question, but is this something that's still on your radar, and how are you going to go about achieving that goal?
It'll always be on my radar. Yeah. I mean, I got to grow one hell of a company. So I can't even really think about the Red Wings until I've grown one hell of a company. and I am giving everything I've got to growing a company. And sometimes it is, because I'm not in the minute to minute, because I'm not dealing with the fact that a refrigerator didn't show up to an install this morning, you know but what I'm contributing is a really important component, and my partner as well, to building a franchise company, which is people buy franchises from people that they like, respect, uh, and it's people don't buy franchises from companies. People buy franchises from people. And so what I want to do is I want to present myself in a way and build content around myself that people can read and understand and then know who they're signing up with if they become a franchise owner within our system. And that's a really healthy part of the process, right? Because that way we're going to get people into our system who are well aligned with the way we think and the way we run the business and so on. And then we're all going to be able to function better together, right? And then my partner's got a bunch of stuff going on for in a different part of the business, which is super important as well. And so we're growing a business here. Like I don't want anybody to think that like me writing books and teaching a class is not growing a business. I mean, I think if I was a prospective franchise owner and I was looking into a franchise, and then one of the co-founders, co-CEOs of the business had written books on entrepreneurship and was teaching at the #1 entrepreneurship program in the country, like that goes a long ways, I think, and so that's what I'm trying to bring to the table. And so I'm the reason I'm telling you all that is that I'm not walking away by my behavior and what I'm doing and the way I'm living. I am not walking away from building one hell of a business. I'm building an extraordinary business here. And I'm doing what I think is absolutely perfectly appropriate in order to do that. And I've got to do that even to have like I have to have I figure $1 billion net worth to own the Red Wings. And so, or to even have a chance. That's just have a chance to own the Red Wings, right? And so that's what I'm in the midst of. That's what I'm doing. That's the challenge. That's the that's the puzzle. That's the game I'm playing, and it's a fun game.
And that's the grind, right?
Yeah.
That's the grind. Well, you've built one hell of a company and you're going to continue building it. You've got a great team around you. The final question I have for you, Mike, is so where I get my Biggby coffee is a small town in Southwest Michigan. So you're in Southeast Michigan, but I'm really Southwest. I'm at the border of Indiana.
Yeah.
So very Southwest, and it could definitely use some love from Mike McFall. And so the question is, if you have any interest in coming down, visiting that Biggby Coffee, grabbing a coffee with me. I know that you don't let anybody have free coffee, so of course I'll buy mine and yours.
No, I'll buy it for you. I'll buy it. What town? What story are you talking about?
It's on. Let me find the specific street. I believe it's on like County Road 6 in Elkhart, Indiana.
Oh, in Elkhart. Okay,
Yeah.
sure. All right. So you are on the border. You're right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that store's been there for a while. But I don't have any immediate plans to get in that direction. I may be going to Saugatuck in the next month. We'll see. It's still a ways from Indiana, but I don't have any immediate plans. But I'd love to take you for coffee.
Well, I've got the long horizon here because we also have a golf course called the Four Lakes Country Club, and my co-founder and I would love to play golf and grab coffee with you. So whenever it is that you end up in this area, we'll make ourselves available.
All right. Awesome. I'll take you up on that. That's cool.
It'd be a lot of fun.
It
Well,
would be.
thank you, Mike McFall. It's been great. Do you have any other final thoughts or advice you'd like to share with the listeners?
No, that was thorough. that, was, that was great. No, it was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Okay, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and look forward to hanging out and grabbing coffee, playing golf in the future.
All right, great.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Yeah.